When I think of exemplary live service, there are few games that come to mind, and not many come to my mind as fast as the Monster Hunter series. I think ever since Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter has just been on a stride, on a roll, and with Wilds coming out, which is essentially World 2, I think we're going to see the biggest explosion Monster Hunter has ever seen, and it is all a contribution of a wide variety of factors that I think a lot of AAA companies could learn from in terms of how to actually build a brand, a live service into something that gains loyalty over the long term, that is attributed to developers just treating the customers with respect. And so let's take a look at Monster Hunter Wilds beta statistics right now. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, is actually insane. We can see right here an all-time peak of 463,798 players. This is just the beta. The game is not out right now, and this is just on Steam, by the way. These games tend to sell a lot on, obviously, on consoles as well. What's crazy about this number is that despite this just being the beta, it's already surpassed the overall all-time peak for Monster Hunter World, which peaked at 334,684 players 6.3 years ago, around the time when it launched, as you can see. The fact that the beta is beating its predecessor, I mean, if that doesn't tell you how explosive this game's going to be, nothing will. 463,000 versus 334,000. And Monster Hunter World did extremely well for Capcom over the long term. It was announced in March of 2024 that Monster Hunter World topped 25 million units globally. If that's what Monster Hunter World did with these all-time peak concurrent player numbers after the game's launch, imagine what Wilds will do if we're seeing numbers like these in just the beta before the game is even launched. This is in stark contrast to something like, say, Concord, which during its beta, it saw an all-time peak concurrent player number of just 2,388 players. And when the game launched, it only saw numbers in the mid to high triple digits, almost 700 players. This could not be a more stark night and day difference. Now, recall that EA tried to do their own take on Monster Hunter in the form of Wild Hearts, a valiant attempt, and initially there was an all-time peak concurrent player number of 28,500 players, but that has quickly plummeted into irrelevance. This is a game that tried to ride the coattails of Monster Hunter, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being inspired by a certain genre and trying to do your own spin on it. And while it ultimately launched to decent critical reception, the fact remains that Monster Hunter is the king of this genre, and Wild Hearts ultimately could not compete. But it's important to understand that once upon a time, Monster Hunter was not what it is today. Monster Hunter, once upon a time, was little known, very niche, and it took a lot of iterating on this formula and a lot of releases before Monster Hunter garnered the level of success that it did. And over all those years, it took a certain consideration for the community and the fan base that was slowly building and not fucking them over. It's all the goodwill that Monster Hunter built up over the many years that it's existed as a series that also helped culminate in what became a massive sustainable success. So just to give you an idea for the timeline of Monster Hunter, the first Monster Hunter came out all the way back in 2004, which means it's already been over 20 years since the first game came out, and Monster Hunter Wilds will have come out essentially 21 years after the first game. And World came out in 2018, so that's roughly 14 years after Monster Hunter, the first game. Monster Hunter World, I'd say, is when this series became a mass market success. It took that long, that much iterating, and that much continuous just kind of working on this series and staying true to it, and also like appealing to the community and being and kind of valuing the loyalty of that community and understanding like who this game is for and sticking to its identity and all these things before it kind of caught fire and before word spread and before people realized just why this formula is so fun. And after all of the refinements, it became more appealing to the masses. And so it's this buildup that led to the success of Monster Hunter. And it's a kind of success that I think a lot of AAA publishers are trying to replicate from the outset. They're trying to make the first entry of a brand new IP, a live service in that brand new IP, be a billion-dollar franchise from the outset. That's what Concord was supposed to be. That's what the hopes and dreams were surrounding it, which was just egotistical folly. They pour all this money and resources and overinflate the budget of something that they hope will be just an instant home run, when home runs take a lot of practice to master. You know what I mean? And that's what Monster Hunter did. It took its time to master its formula before it hit its stride through patience and perseverance and through efforts that just was a long-term venture that eventually panned out. That's what so many AAA publishers don't get, is that the successes that they're seeing from the likes of Larian Studios, from Software, Capcom with franchises like Monster Hunter, this took years of nurturing and cultivating and protecting and just kind of sticking to the identity of the franchise and valuing that identity and the community that loves that franchise's identity before the refinements and the buildup of community and loyalty eventually kind of made it a breakout success. And with Wild essentially layering more on top of this established formula and not deviating too much from what this franchise's IP should be, just kind of making what already exists better with now like a seamless open world with the addition of like new mounts and new monsters and weapons and all these things, new features, new quality of life enhancements. It's just gonna spread word more of the greatness that is Monster Hunter, and this is a live service that will take off, on top of the fact that its model is very consumer friendly. Like, there are like little bits of like kind of very ignorable microtransactions here and there, like just a lot of like minuscule dumb little things, but aside from that, this is a game that continuously evolves through free updates, free content additions, and with the eventual release of a major expansion that tends to be more than worth its asking price. And those free updates just keep the game fresh. Monster Hunter games always feel like they've launched complete. They don't feel like they're nickel and diming you for the full experience. Sans a few like little minor cosmetic things that, even then, in comparison to the price points that other live services set, it's so much lower and cheaper and, actually like micro in transaction that it's somewhat forgivable in the grand scheme of everything else that every new entry of a Monster Hunter game offers, in the replay value, in the fun factor, in all the multiplayer features that kind of have made it into a live service almost, and all of those free updates that make this just the ideal live service model. Now, despite the success of the beta, that's not to say that there aren't some problems that they still have to deal with before the game's launch. But before we get into that, you know what's a real problem? The way shady entities decide to take your personal data and information and share that to other entities who you would not want. Which brings us to the sponsor of today's video, DeleteMe, a subscription service dedicated to helping you keep your personal information safe and secure and private. Data brokers are constantly out there trying to profit off of selling your personal data to nefarious actors, so it is more important than ever to be proactive about your digital footprint, and that's where DeleteMe comes in. With this service, in one fell swoop, you can delete your personal information from search results and hundreds of data broker websites. Everything from your name, age, past and present addresses, photos, email, phone numbers, relatives, social media, occupation, marital status, property value, you name it. Information that could be used in shady ways. I didn't realize just how public my data was until I saw my first report from DeleteMe detailing just how many data broker websites had my personal information. And I mean, I'm someone who is a public figure, is a greater risk of being the target of harassment, doxing, scams, identity theft, stalking, you name it. And so that's a major concern for me, and having DeleteMe come in and do a big sweep on my personal data, that's actually a pretty big relief. I also have the security of knowing that DeleteMe is constantly active, monitoring sites and removing data as needed, and providing privacy reports every 3 months to keep me in the know about all that stuff. You can even make your own custom requests to have your information removed from specific sources by DeleteMe's experts. So if digital privacy is a top priority for you, you can protect your data with DeleteMe by using my link, joindeleteme.com/Yong20 and my code Yong20 to get 20% off at checkout, with family plans available as well. You can also find all of this in the description and comment section below. But anyway, as I was saying, there are some problems with the beta that people have noticed that they hope does get resolved. But the great thing about the beta is that that's the whole purpose of it, is to get people to stress test the game and to get their feedback so that they can make adjustments prior to the full launch of Monster Hunter Wilds, which comes out in late February of 2025. So that's November, December, January, February, like 3.5 to 4 months roughly before the game comes out. That's plenty of time to make all of the necessary adjustments and fix the technical issues that the beta did encounter. I really want this game to have a smooth launch because the fundamental fun factor of it is there. Again, it's just an evolution of what came before. But technical issues at launch can mar that first impression that you want to keep a strong momentum going from the outset. One of the complaints that I've been seeing is the lack of hit stop for certain weapons and certain animations that were there before. Hit stop, for those who don't know, is that little bit of animation pause and freeze before a big swing or before a swing lands that gives weapons a sense of impact. And there have been complaints about Monster Hunter Wilds weapons feeling off in how they feel to play compared to past entries because of the lack of hit stops for certain weapons within certain animations. There are discussions on the official Monster Hunter subreddit, for example, about this, the lack of hit stop, people wondering why they did this and how this does make weapons just feel less powerful and impactful. Some people theorize that it might have to do with the fact that if there are a lot of smaller monsters, adds kind of in the way, and you cleave through a lot of them at the same time, then it can cause a lot of hit stops to happen at the same time, which can disrupt the flow of gameplay. Others are theorizing that it has to do with just the flow of combat needing some adjustment and whatnot. Some are suggesting that why not just disable hit stops for small monsters and retain it for those encounters with bigger monsters. So there's just a lot of discussion surrounding how hit stops should be handled, whether it should be included or not, whether its inclusion ultimately hampers the flow of gameplay, or whether having that sense of impact is more important. And so those minor, animation stops for the sake of impact is necessary. That's something that the folks at Capcom will have to kind of listen to and find a good balance of, hopefully, is the goal. And then there's the technical issues where people have been noticing not only performance struggles where the game just runs very poorly on PC, but also character models just not loading in properly, draw distance not being kind of in the right settings, because people are noticing, look at this screenshot and look at these low quality models. These are abominations, and these are the models that tend to be there when you're looking at models that are further away, and as they get closer and closer to you, the higher resolution models, the higher polygon models pop in. That's how they kind of try to optimize the game. They don't need high poly models that are further away to take up essentially processing power. That's why they have, multiple fidelities for models, depending on how far you are away from them. There's just something off about the way Monster Hunter Wilds has that kind of toned and tweaked, which is why you're seeing hideous shit like this. And so some of the graphical elements of Monster Hunter Wilds have been rough during the beta, where you approach a monster and the models look like this, essentially a PS1 graphics model, like a freaking origami version of the monster, essentially. So that's another element that's causing concern. And definitely when it comes to performance, that's one area where, Monster Hunter World in particular, it wasn't, I don't know how it is now, but I remember there were performance struggles. And hopefully that's not something that will just kind of carry on with Monster Hunter Wilds. That's something that they need to fix by this point, by this iteration of Monster Hunter. So for example, here we have an article discussing how it's a struggle to run this game smoothly at 1080p resolution on an RTX 4070. Not even 4K, 1080p resolution. A 4070 should be able to handle a game like this at that resolution pretty easily. The fact that we are seeing frame rate stutters and the fact that we are seeing graphical issues might indicate that, technically speaking, performance-wise, we might be in for some rough tidings in the early days of Monster Hunter Wilds launch. Though, at the same time, Capcom did assure that Monster Hunter Wilds launch will improve on the beta. They tweeted something right here where they said that if you're experiencing issues in the Steam version of the open beta test, please check out our troubleshooting and known issues guide. The issue of after-image noise occurring in certain environments when frame generation is enabled will be fixed in the full game, which is already in a more improved state compared to the beta state. So Capcom has assured that they've taken notice of all of the feedback and all of the criticisms and all of the reports of technical issues and are working on it, but whether 3.5 months to 4 months, whether that will be enough time for them to fix all of those issues remains to be seen. It is enough time where I think that it is feasible, but given the history of Monster Hunter World and some of the technical issues surrounding its performance, part of me wouldn't be surprised if Wilds had some performance issues and it wasn't the best optimized game at launch. I'm just kind of preparing folks for that possibility, though I hope that's not the case. The game is going to be fun no matter what, I think, and it's going to be an experience that I think will draw in tons of new folks to the Monster Hunter series, as if World didn't do that enough and Rise didn't do that enough. I think Wilds is just going to be on a whole new level, but it'd be nice to have just the smoothest launch as far as technical issues are concerned and not have these graphical issues and performance issues make the launch of this game meme worthy, you know what I mean? And meme people have with the Monster Hunter Wilds beta. Look at this stuff. This is hilarious, but also a bit concerning, and hopefully it'll be smoothed out. But you can see monsters, low poly models being laughable, cutscenes showing these kinds of models on NPCs. But with everything said and done, I mean, some of the memes have been positive, and just, seeing the hammer kind of thrive in co-op in hilarious ways, seeing weapons do badass things. So, for example, triple dual blades doing badass shit like this, where players coordinate and do these incredibly powerful moves at once at the same time. I mean, look at this Attack on Titan Levi shit going on right here that slay this monster in the most epic way. So there's just still a lot of wholesome stuff being shared online, but then there's stuff like this where the graphics are way off kilter, low poly graphics, models that are laughable in their hideousness. There are clips like these also, oh my god, being shared that highlight that there's some things that Capcom need to work on for this game's launch to be as smooth as possible and make the best impression as possible. I just spotted this meme right here. Somebody doing the artistic interpretation of a monster in Monster Hunter Wilds, low poly version and everything. And I mean, people posting screenshots are showing that some of the monsters are even less well-formed than the mock-up art of the low poly monster. So yeah, stuff like this, hilarious as they are, cannot exist at launch. Stuff like this also cannot exist at launch. This is definitely not acceptable for a final product. This feels like, I mean, this is straight up like Cyberpunk 2077 launch levels of weird model situation. And so hopefully this can be avoided in the final release, but they got some leeway right now because it is the beta, and because the game ultimately has proven to be so fun and addictive. Ultimately, aside from these technical issues being shared and memed, what you're seeing right now that the beta has ended, is people just missing and really desperately wanting to go back, and that kind of pre-release addiction already to the game highlights what I think will be ultimately a very successful title. But with all said and done, ultimately the Monster Hunter Wilds beta went wholesomely to the point where crowds gathered towards its end and decided to wave goodbye as an emote, and just we're already seeing so many great communal elements within this game, and the love and the loyalty and the goodwill shines through when you look at everything people are doing with this game and the community, how they're coming together during this beta phase, and to celebrate a brand new entry in what is a very special series that has developed and become so special through long-term efforts and not through immediate gratification. And immediate gratification is what AAA publishers seek when they kind of try to put out a new IP out there. And you just don't do that. You got to build that over time and really kind of respect the integrity and the artistry of what you're making, and then really nurture that over the course of a long time to garner the kind of success that we're seeing now from, again, studios like Larian, FromSoft, CD Projekt, Capcom with Monster Hunter. This was none of these studios and none of these franchises were overnight successes, and you cannot expect as a AAA publisher to establish an overnight success. Those happen every once in a while, but that cannot be the immediate pursuit. That has to come as a pleasant surprise, not as the expectation, because when you expect overnight success, that's when your expectations for how much this game needs to sell and how much profit it needs to make for it to be considered a success. Even if it sold millions of units, the fact that such games can be deemed not successful because the budget ballooned so high because of ridiculous, unrealistic expectations instead of this long-term aspiration. That is what I think fucks a lot of franchises and IPs and a lot of studios and developers even who get the punishment for poor leadership and management and just the lack of sense of long-term scope. So Monster Hunter in so many areas, again, is an exemplary example of how to do live service, both in terms of how to treat a franchise right, how to evolve a genre and a formula correctly, and respect the source material and what makes it special to the community, while also being financially viable and allowing for a model where you can release all of this free content and not have to nickel and dime players. It's just doing everything right. And so I just wanted to highlight that in a sea of really bad examples of how not to launch games and how not to do live services. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything you need to know about the current state of Monster Hunter Wilds, what's happened with the beta, and its current level of success that it's achieving even months before launch. This game is going to take off into the stratosphere. I know it. I can feel it. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Monster Hunter Wilds, if you got to play the beta, and what your prospects are for the series as a whole. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.